it's related to something else or whatever. Like, okay, maybe I'm just being judgy. Maybe status seeking is a perfectly valid source of meaning, right?
Interested. So, a couple of things. How did you find or define those buckets, or what kind of drew the inspiration there? I guess question one. Question two is like, as you're working with a patient through those categories, how is there like an aspect of experimentation for them to kind of be able to discover what's meaningful if they don't know, if they come to you
Totally.
and yeah, okay.
So great questions. Yeah, great questions. So how did I find the things is I started with the open-ended questions and tried to notice patterns, right? So I had I did it just through sort of brute force. I'm going to have these conversations with hundreds of people and then just see where the buckets are and kind
Oh,
of define them, right? And that's partly why I still start with the open-ended questions because even up to, so for instance, I am currently considering, and I think it is, whether seeking status should be its own bucket, right?
okay.
I- And I wouldn't have thought so. I would have thought that seeking status is an insecurity or it's related to something else or whatever. But I've met a couple people now where it seems like they just love the game for the sake of the game. They just like to be the winner, right? They like more to have more points than anybody else
Can
for
think
its
of
own sake, right? And so I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just being judgy. Maybe status seeking is a perfectly valid source of meaning, right? And I need to hop off my high horse and be like, okay, that's a source of meaning, right? Um, in terms of how to explore if you don't know, couple things. I think one of the things that people get wrong in the meaning and purpose space is you, it's actually not a good thing to have just one source of meaning, right?
mm,
One of my favorite psychological frameworks is one is a prison, two is a dilemma, three is freedom. So you need at least three options, my opinion, three sources of meaning. So intimacy, making your mark on the world, building, discovering, exploring. If you had all three you're pursuing concurrently in your life, you will feel that as fulfilling, right? Um, when you start to siphon down to just one, you see this a lot with moms, right?
mm,
It's a very fulfilling role, but they have a sense of having been flattened out that
mm.
I'm nothing more than mom. I'm nothing more than my role, right? And having those other two makes you a 3D person psychologically. You feel like a person, right? Um, startup CEOs do the same thing. Is they just do that, right? To the exclusion of everything else. And even though they know that their startup, that what they're working on is meaningful and they care about it, they don't feel like their life is meaningful. And it's because they flattened out into a single role, a single source of meaning. If they pursued two others, immediately they would have a sense of like relief. I've seen this many times in my practice where you just open up two more and great, okay, now I feel like that's hitting. Um, and so how to
That's
find those?
yeah.
That's a great question. The the interesting thing, I love doing this because it's fun, but when you ask someone, why do you care about that? Right? If you ask why enough, you get to the point where the person you can see their brain short circuit, right?
Mm,
So if you say, "Oh, hey, okay, you want to lose weight. Cool. Why do you care about that?" Well, I want to set a good example for my family. Oh, okay, so it's about your family. Well, why do you care about setting a good example for your family? Well, I think that, a really manly man does set a good example. Okay, so it's not about your family, it's about being the best man you can be. Okay. And you keep asking why. By the way, that progress towards your ideal vision of yourself was a category I forgot. So growth in short terms. Okay, so it's progress towards your ideal self. That's the driver. Why do you care about that? Oh, well, I care about that because I think I'll be more attractive to my partner. Okay, so now it's about intimacy, and you keep asking why, right? But eventually, when you ask why, y their brain has no answer. It's not that they're thinking about it and they're like, well, maybe it's because whatever. Their brain literally short circuits because the real answer is that's who I am. That's how I fit with the universe, and there isn't a why anymore, right? So my big driver. intimacy is probably the biggest driver for me. I name my three: intimacy, building, discovering, and exploring, and making my mark on the world. Those are my big three. And if you ask me, well, why do you care about intimacy? I don't have an answer for you. There's no why. It just is, right? Um, and so that's one of the ways you can explore even in conversation. Um, the other one is if they talk about that subject, you'll see them light up, right? So even in this conversation, when we started, we were in the introduction, we were just getting to know each other, right? I'm sipping on coffee. I've been doing night shifts. I've done 14 night shifts, 12-hour shifts in a row. Kind of like then you're like River Rock and like meaning and purpose, and I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk about meaning and purpose. I'm excited about the discoveries here, right? So you can see that. You can see the person light up when they hit that topic. And so in my previous example, he'll be like, "Yeah, I want to work out and lose weight." It's, yeah, kind of. And then it's, "Yeah, family." And yeah. And then when you hit on, "Oh, yeah, it's because I want my wife to be more attracted to me." Like, okay, why do you care about that? Well, I just love her so much. And you see lights come on, right? So you can learn to watch for those things and then reflect it back to the patient and say, "Hey, I noticed that when we were talking, whenever this subject came up, your lights came on, right? Let's talk about that a little bit deeper." And so it does help to have somebody reflect back to you. It's hard to do alone, I would say. Um, Partly because even if you did real world experiments, like you say, "Oh, well, maybe music is my thing, or maybe, whatever is my thing," it's never quite like in my working out example just now is like, well, am I working out to make progress toward my ideal self, to grow, or is it for my intimate relationship, or is it for my family, or is it can you can be doing it and you're not clear why. You're still not clear why. You maybe you feel fulfilled, but it's still not clear what else you could do because you haven't figured out why you're fulfilled. The other problem is that just like working out, often it doesn't feel good. Pursuing meaning often does not feel good. It feels pretty bad a lot of the time. I mean, I love River Rock with an unholy love. Like I love my practice, right? Um, but there's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if I'm missing something. I don't know. I just made all this up and I'm telling people this is the truth. Like, am I getting it wrong? Am I hurting anybody? And then the business side of it too is like, well, am I going to keep the lights on?
Mhm.
Have I, early when I started it, I'm like, well, I've got one patient. Okay. Like, and so along that path is and has been a tremendous amount of stress and worry and difficulty and yeah, angst. I mean, I'm starting my YouTube channel, which you kindly found. Eh, Okay, and I've got 500 subscribers, right? I want to build it. I want, I think I've got an important message, but man, there's a lot of work and difficulty along that pathway. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I think that's the other reason people struggle with finding meaning is they're looking for something that feels good because a meaningful life sounds like it should feel good, but usually it doesn't feel that great. Uh, it, it just feels meaningful.
Right. That's yeah, I mean, you bring up some really, again, it's kind of counterintuitive points here that you have to dig in deeper and you have to go down the
Mm.
rabbit hole, and
Mhm.
that's what I love about your channel, is it inspires that. And I agree that you have a really important message to get out there. And I think especially within the longevity community, well, within any community, but kind of from the context I'm coming from, I think this is an important message for people to hear, trying to optimize every like aspect of their
Yeah,
health.
yeah.
There's just so much more here. And so yeah,
The, one of the examples I love to give is like Olympians, right? Who is more optimized physically than an Olympic athlete, right? But pretty clearly, a lot of them are sacrificing longevity, right?
yeah,
If you're an Olympic boxer, you are sacrificing longevity to get that gold medal, right?
right,
But why? Because it's worth it to you. That's how you fit with the universe, right? Is I'm willing to endure incredible amounts of pain, trauma, brain injury, uh, incredibly hard workouts, right? All this difficulty, all this stress, all this pain, all this true damage, loss of longevity, right? I know I'm going to spend my last years with dementia probably, right? Why? And it's worth it. And that worth it semantic is the thing that we're looking for, is what's worth it. And yeah, I think even if you live to 200 years, you still have to ask that question. Even if I could wave a magic wand and everybody's longevity is optimized, well, cool. Now you still have to answer that question. What's worth it to you?
It's got to be an interesting position that you're in when you get to know a patient deeply, and maybe what brings them meaning is directly in conflict with a health optimization tactic.
100%.
And
Well,
then
yeah,
you're
for longevity optimization at the very least. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And that's part of the reason I've started switching, and I didn't mean to be pedantic there, but part of the reason I've started switching the way I use the word health.
Mhm.
Health is optimizing what I call meaning span, is the combination of the area of length of life and depth of life. That to me is health, right? And the reason that's important is I could be de-optimizing longevity, and if I'm gaining a ton of depth and meaning and purpose, I'm still optimizing health.
Okay, that's a really important. I'm glad you stopped me and clarified that because I think that is a really important distinction there when I use
Yeah.
that word.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I argue with, I mean, this is one of the challenges I have with other physicians, right? Is I think that in the hospital, especially, but in medicine in general, we assume that longevity optimization is health optimization, right? And that constitutes a form of pushing our values onto our patients. And then we end up in conflict in certain ways because, hey, I want to be a bodybuilder. I want to be an elite bodybuilder. Well, you're not getting to the Olympia level if you're not taking steroids.
Yeah.
There's no way to do that, right? And so, but if that's your passion, maybe you're willing to die at 55, right? Should I be pushing my values onto you and say, no, 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 you need to not do? Well, yeah, I don't think that I should be in the position of telling you that your passions are incorrect. Like that's a weird position to me for a doctor to be in. And yet that's the position I think most physicians put themselves in because they haven't
Well,
accounted
because
for
I,
this.
yeah, yeah, because I mean, you're not just accounting for goal alignment with a patient, that could be maybe superficially discussed, but
Mhm.
value alignment,
Yeah.
which is that deep dive that you're doing to really understand where they're coming from and even probably help unlock what meaning is for them.
Yeah, we'll go one layer deeper actually to talk about that. So I talk about meaning and purpose. It's actually that actually is only one leg of a three-legged stool, but it's the one that's most common and it's the one that's easiest to resonate with. So I talk about it the most. What I'm really doing secretly in the background is what Jung called individuation. So
Mhm.
Jung viewed the notion of psychological development and the progress through life as the progress of becoming the most you that you can be, right? And meaning and pursuing meaning and purpose is a big part of that. Figuring out
Mhm.
how you fit with the universe, what things are worth it to you, and doing those, right? But the other two aspects of identity building, so meaning and purpose is one aspect of identity building. The other two aspects are trait expansion. So if I'm an introvert, learning to be able, sorry, um, learning to be able to act as an extrovert sometimes.
Mhm.
If I'm
Yeah.
super organized and I like things to be just so, learning to tolerate a certain amount of mess, right? So the standard big five personality traits, learning to have a wider operating range is part of that. So I call that trait expansion. And the other one is ethics and values, is having clarity on your hierarchy of values. What things are most important to you? Are you are you trustworthy actually is a big part of that, right? And trustworthiness is consistency, initiative, having a code, having a standard to which you can be held. So it's not just whatever I feel in the moment. If your ethics are, well, I do whatever feels right, well, then you can never be wrong. Like you can literally never be held accountable because you did what you felt was right, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and so having an external standard to hold yourself to, um, and and I bring up this idea of trustworthiness because I think it's easiest to find this idea like if somebody were looking at you and they were really they were an abused person, or they're really untrustworthy, would your way of being in the world inspire trust in them because you're that consistent? And they're like, okay, this person's safe. I can hang with this person, right? And then consider that in some way, all of our unconscious is that abused child, that abused person, and ask, are you trustworthy to yourself? Right?
Hmm.
And turn that back around and say, am I traumatizing myself by being inconsistent, by not upholding a standard? Right? And I'm doing that every day because I'm inconsistent in my beliefs, in my values, in my actions. My my life does not uphold the values that I say I ascribe to, right? Um, so those are the other two legs. And I don't talk about those as much because those conversations get philosophically very deep, I think, a lot of the time. Not that and meaning and purpose is deep enough. We're already already in deep waters.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think the whole goal there is to be the most you that you can be, to fit yourself with the universe as tightly as you can be fit, as much yourself as you can be. So what's the most Brian you could be? And then how can that Brian be really deeply integrated and fitted with the universe in the ways that those puzzle pieces go together?
Yeah, that's there's a lot to
Not
unpack.
your average medical practice.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
yeah,
No kidding.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And
Sorry, I dragged us into deep waters there, but
yeah, no, no,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
no worries at all. Yeah, so I mean, I can imagine as a physician, working with a patient there, going through these layers of depth with them, has to foster, a long-term relationship because, this is like a lifelong journey that we're talking about. So I can imagine, a lot of your patients are with you for,
You
indefinite.
know, yeah, you know what's been really interesting. I thought so too when I started, right?
Okay.
And
All
it
right.
hasn't been that way.
Huh.
And it hasn't been that way in my mind for the best possible reason, which I didn't anticipate, but is the case, is uh, when a patient really gets it, they don't need me anymore. Like,
Um,
they're off. I've had so many patients that are now off living meaningful lives, and you know, I'm not a part of that anymore. I don't need to be a part of that anymore, right? Um, and so, yeah, by the way, I joke with my friends, I'm discovering what the pharmaceutical companies knew long ago, which is that there ain't no money in a cure, right? And so the business
yeah.
side of the practice actually is a challenge
Mhm.
because people keep getting better, right? They keep getting so much better and they have all the skills that they need to continue improving on their own. And I'm just not necessary. And so great reason, but it does create a business use case. So if any of your audience is in Austin and wants to come optimize, I need patience, man.
Do you work in a virtual setting with folks who aren't in your immediate area for folks who want to reach out?
Your audience can probably tell that overthinking is not foreign to me, um, but I think the key is whether a doctor-patient relationship has been formed.